Peace, family. We are live again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Huru. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure you hit that like button. And please hit that like button. Also, make sure you share and make sure you subscribe. I will greatly appreciate it. Before we get started, we got a couple of announcements. Announcement number one. Now, my Aboriginal, we ain't African, we Indians. I know y'all don't. Let me turn this off. I know y'all might not believe in DNA tests. Hold on one second. Okay, sorry about that. Now I know my indigenous, we ain't African, we the Native American Olmecs, and where the slave ships at. I know you guys might not believe in DNA tests. I know you guys might not believe in DNA tests and you think it's a scam. But there's a country named Sierra Leone. There is a country called Sierra Leone that does. And if you take a DNA test with either African Ancestry, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, or I think it's called CRI, and if any of those results come back to Sierra Leone, you're eligible for citizenship. So I know some of my Aboriginal family, you guys aren't on any Native American rosters, have no tribal status. But if you take a DNA test, we will find you we will connect you with a tribe in Sierra Leone and you will get your citizenship. So please visit donfo.africa. Please visit donfo.africa to learn more. I am hosting a group in April, and then I will be personally going with a group in December. Again, I'm hosting a group in April, and then I will be personally going with a group in December. So please visit donfo.africa to learn more. We are also going to Senegal for the Jazz Festival in May, Nigeria in August for the Oshun Festival. Then we are going to Zanzibar in September, South Africa and Namibia in November. And then we are rolling back to Sierra Leone in December. So if you are interested in joining us, please visit donfo.africa. Again, if you are interested in rolling with us, please visit donfo.africa. Let's jump into today's topic. And let me read what I actually posted. Hold on. I posted this. I found this. I found this on someone else's page and I posted it. And this is what it said. We the real Aztecs. Let me share the screen. This is what I posted. We the real Aztecs. We the real Chinese. We the real Indians. We the real Europeans. We the real Greeks. We the real Jews. We the real Vikings. We the real Irish. But we ain't no damn Africans. My grandma told me, because it's always the grandma. Y'all are always implicating your grandma. My grandma told me we was already her in Turtle Island. Y'all ain't embarrassed by this remedial shit by now? And somebody responded. She was like, Dinus, if it wasn't for the Africans who were complicit, the tribes who sold us for umbrellas, rusty muskets, gin, we wouldn't have this identity problem. I said, oh. So I was like, let's have a conversation. Is it Africa's fault? Was Africa, not all of Africa? No, we don't want to generalize all of Africa. Those who participated in the slave trade. Yeah, Seriki Abbas, Francisco de Souza, who were Portuguese returnees. I mean, just in general. Are they part of the blame on why Black Americans are claiming to be Olmecs, Indians, Aztecs, Mayans, the original Navajos, Moors, the Hebrews? Because if I'm in Africa, they don't do this. When I'm in Africa, they're Yoruba, Igbo, Minde, Chimne, Fula, Wolof. They don't. They ain't running around saying they're the Hebrews and the Moors and the Buddha was a black man. The original Indians, the original Aborigines of Australia, they're not saying none of this. The original black samurai, the original black Japanese and Filipinos, and they're not saying this. This is a product of the West. And like I said before, if you want to go deeper, this is a product of the prison system. I'm convinced this comes from the prison system, the majority of it, if you ask me. I don't know what books they got in the prison system, but this is coming from the prison system. We the original Canadians. Where the slave ships at? The Mississippi River is the real Nile River. The pyramids are in America. This is the real Egypt. This is all coming from America. This is all a product of America. The Mississippi River is the Nile River. What else? We the Hebrews. Those Olmec statues, that's us. I'm a Moor, and you have no jurisdiction over me. I can travel independently throughout America because of a treaty that was between a prince and the United States of America. So therefore, You have no jurisdiction over me, and I have a right to travel without a license, no tag, no insurance, because of the treaty between the Moors and the United States government. I'm not making this up. So should we blame Africa? Because I don't hear any Africans saying this. I don't hear none of this. See, you don't know about the treaty, and we fall under the treaty between the Moors and the United States of. A shout out to Elvis, real quick, guys. So I don't drink. I really don't drink. I barely drink, but I bought, a friend of mine. So I'm in a group like it's called Greeks on the Motherland. So all the black, Greeks, the as you guys call us, the boule, the so-called black boule fraternities and sororities, as you guys call us. We're in a group, the ones who are involved in regards to doing work in Africa, in the continent. And there's a Liberian sister who was selling, you guys get that. This is Liberian vodka made in Liberia. So I don't drink. This is pretty much somebody comes over, they want to drink, I'll host them. I'll pop this open then. But I like to buy alcohol from black owned companies. So this is made in Liberia. It's called Ham's Honey, made in Liberia. And it came in the other day, and I actually got another bottle, which I'm gonna gift to somebody. But yeah, so Ham's Honey. I had the joint from Haiti. I cracked that open though. Had some people over. I cracked that open. But yeah, I like to buy black owned alcohol. I don't drink like that. I might take a shot when whenever I open it. But yeah, this is straight from Liberia. Hams North America Inc. is the distributor. They're based in Pennsylvania. And like I said, they sent me another bottle by accident because I only bought one. They were like, listen, just gift it to somebody, shout us out. I said, no problem. So this is Ham's Honey alcohol, product of Liberia. There we go. Just had it right here. I just opened it up today. Took it out the box today. So yeah. So that's what's going on. Is it Africa's fault? Where can you buy it? Here. I don't know if they have a website. I don't know if they have a website. There's no website on here. Well, let me real quick, guys. Later on, I'll get the see if there's a site, but there's a phone number. There's two phone numbers on here. So yeah. So yeah. When a Moore goes into a courtroom with his red fez on, and he says to the court, "You have no jurisdiction over me because of the treaty and the Black Laws Dictionary, and there's no such thing as the word black, and you have no jurisdiction over me. Therefore, you cannot sentence me, and you have to let me go because I'm a Moor, and there's a treaty." Is that the Africans' fault? Is that the Africans' fault? Will we blame the Africans? I don't know, but hit the like button. I'm gonna put the link in the chat room if you guys want to call in and add to the conversation. Is this a result of slavery? Is this a product of slavery? Is this a product of slavery? But guys, links in the chat room. Links in the chat room if you want to call in and add to the conversation. You're more than welcome to call in and add to the conversation, guys. I want to apologize. I forgot to read the rest of the super chats yesterday, and I apologize. But real quick, somebody sent over Cash App. Black Rose sent the $50 holla yesterday on a super chat. I'm sorry, on the Cash App, and then we have super chats as well. So, African Superstar, go ahead.
Hey, Dynas, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. Shout outs to the Search for Uhuru family in the building. I'm actually doing a whole series on my channel about proximity and the dangers of proximity when we live among our enemies, how distorted things become. And so this topic, I've been talking about it on my channel, but actually I just did a correlation between what South Africans go through and Black Americans. And you see that the Black Americans, unfortunately, have their whole identity has been distorted now to the point they just don't know where they come from, or they deny where they come from. And that just comes from centuries of being in that toxic environment. You know what I mean? Because other members of the diaspora don't necessarily have that same projection. The South Africans have a lot of trauma and things like that because of the apartheid. But again, that is the remnants of being in proximity with these people, and the concept that we think we can live among them and not ingest their confusion and all of that. Because one of their key strategies is to divide and conquer. And you could see this even through what they did in the slave trade, where they would, they kind of created the colorism hierarchy and those type of things. It's always to divide us. So a lot of people now are trying to estrange themselves from their origins and whatnot. And I mean, it's mental illness, but definitely it's not originating from the continent. You and I have traveled all around Africa, and we see,
right,
in as much that people on the continent, they have their own, version of colonialism, these infatuations with these foreign religions and other things. But that sense of that loss of identity, rather, is not, evident here. People know exactly where they come from, and they don't try to estrange themselves from their root. So that's what I wanted to offer to this topic here.
No, I completely agree. How's Ghana?
Yeah, it's good, man. When you come and see me, what's up?
Man, I don't know when I'm coming. I don't know when I'm coming to Ghana. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I might pass through this year. I don't know.
Yeah, I know you so busy. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I'll catch up with you around or something. I don't know, but
yeah, I'll be around.
Yeah, what's your next? Are you going to South Sierra Leone next?
I'll be in Senegal in May.
Okay. Man, I'm so mad I missed that voodoo festival, man. That's where I know it was in January. Yeah, hopefully next year maybe I can make it. I really want to see those masks. I'm dying to see them.
I'll be there.
I'm dying to see them. Yeah, I'm dying to see them. So,
hey, everybody, make sure you go subscribe. African Superstar, put your site, put your YouTube page in the chat room.
Okay. Let me get the link.
Go subscribe, or put it in the private chat if you can't put it in the chat room. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, yes, sir. Well, yes, ma'am. Yes, African Superstar.
It's all right. It's been a long time. I got to, get in on this search for Uhuru. I just got off my channel, but this topic is rich. It's in this movement is really. I don't know if it's social media is projecting it, but it just seems like they're really, really ingesting these ideas and trying to project them out there, and it's just completely absurd. I actually found a Native American on TikTok. His name is Warmaker.
Mhm.
and they are starting to denounce this. The Native Americans are saying, "Hey, man, you guys are Africans, and I understand all the trauma and everything, but you can't just go and hijack somebody else's culture." So
Right.
he does like a live stream on TikTok like all the time, and these pretendians will get up there on the panel, and he'll just let them have it. And he said, "Go ahead and take that DNA test." They say, "Oh, the DNA test is not accurate." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he's like, "That's the same one you use for paternity, the same one they use to solve crimes, the same ones they do the blood work. So how? The one for the DNA to Africa is different."
Right. Because see, brother, they don't want us to have real ownership of the land. So that's why the DNA test for as far as for Africa to
It's a
see where you come from
conspiracy.
is fake
It's a
because
conspiracy.
it's a conspiracy because they're gonna remove us from the land. Because we got our we got our case with the World Court and the ICC, and they're gonna force the American government to give us back the land.
On- Only detail: United States has never ratified the ICC or the International Court of Justice. So ICC or ICJ are not applicable to the U.S. citizen.
Go ahead, Ditto.
Uh, Prince, African superstar of this morning. Hello, thanks. Thank you for having me again. I just want to come up and answer your question. Is it Africa's fault that Black Americans think they're Olmecs, Indians, Moors, Hebrews, etc.? No. Short and sweet answer: it is not Africa's fault. Partially, part of the fault goes to Europe, and the other part of the fault goes to each of the countries in here in the Western Hemisphere that in the last 200, 250 years have not decolonized and have not uh, done the homework of really creating an identity post uh, European invasion. So simple and short and sweet, Africa carries no blame, no fault in that ignorance of the pretendians and that stupidity of the pretendians.
Mm. Go ahead, Elvis.
All right, thank you, Dinas. Look, I would say yes, but before I even say that, let me say, if people can be transsexual, right? What's
No,
wrong with people?
no, no,
What's
no,
wrong with people being transracial? People
no,
can change their race. But let me
no.
say, I do agree that Africa is at fault, and I can't speak for everybody and go through the operation of their minds. But I think when you look at the continent, people looking from outside, especially those who live in the United States or live in the West, they see how undeveloped the continent is. They see how much poverty and problems we have. People love to be associated with greatness. People love to be associated with success. And I think a lot of people on their psyche, I think there was a brother on the show the other night that said, why can't Africa just figure it out? We want to be proud of Africa. We want Africa to be doing well. People want to be associated with you when you're doing well. And I think for the most part, people in the diaspora don't think that Africa is doing well, so they try to distance, themselves from Africa. They might be going a bit too extreme by trying to, be transracial, put, another race, put themselves into another race category. But I think it's partially our fault because we haven't enticed, the diasporans to want to be attached or associated with us, and that's because of bad leadership, like that Tariq's son says. It's the government. Government hasn't led the people in the right way and foster development that would make people want to come back and be associated with their mother continent. So I don't think Africa is blameless in this regard, but I do think that some of these people, like you said, Dinas, on the show yesterday, have been told lies by their grandparents. That they have, a large portion of their DNA is Indian or whatever, and only to take a test and find out that maybe it's not true. And there are some people who do have or who does have Indian DNA. But I think if the continent was doing a lot better than it is right now, a lot of people will want to be associated with the continent. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. 1,000% Prince P. Go ahead.
Yeah, salute to the panel. Salute to you, Dinus. I wanted to kind of piggyback on what African superstar said. She said something along the lines that proximity is the reason why um, African Americans, or some of them, claim that they're native. I want to understand why she said that.
Hey, African superstar, unmute yourself. You had a lot of background noise.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh no, that's okay. Is it better now? Is it
Yeah,
okay?
that must be your AC unit.
Okay, let me turn the fan down. Hold on.
No, you good. You good. You good. I don't want you to be sweating and hot. You know, you
No,
good.
no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not gonna be here too long. Let me answer the brother though.
Mhm.
So basically, when I talk about proximity, I'm talking about being among our enemies, dealing with them on a daily basis. It creates distortion. It creates confusion, and we ingest everything from education to food to culture to the overall ideology. And when that happens, because it's even been said that unfortunately, um, when sometimes when Black Americans come back to the continent, a lot of their behavior is synonymous with white Americans. And that has to do with the fact that we are among them. That is our home and that's our exposure. So, with that being said, we obviously know we're not white Americans. We're also being told we're not Africans. Um, and we learn very limited information about the continent and or negative things that makes us want to also estrange ourselves from the continent. So that begins to cross the line. I'm not an African. I'm American. My family's been here for centuries, which is often the argument. Okay, just totally negating your roots and totally negating historical accounts and what has taken place. So that's what I mean proximity. And I don't know how much you've traveled or if you've lived in different countries, but when I talk about the diaspora at large, I've lived in Europe. I'm now here living in Ghana, and obviously I grew up in the US. So I see the difference of different members of the diaspora in regards to this. I've never met anyone in England who says they are indigenous to England. I've never met anybody from the Caribbean who says they're indigenous to the Caribbean. So the further away from the continent we get, the more distortion we see displayed. And when I also talked about proximity earlier, I mentioned the South Africans and a lot of similarities between the Black Americans and the South Africans. And one thing they have in common is living in proximity with white people. White people have created the racial construct. They've created segregation in the Western world. They've created apartheid in South Africa. As a result, there's been violence. There's had to be freedom fighting. You see, so a lot of similarities when we live in proximity. So that's what I'm referring to. I hope I've made that clear.
Oh, not, that's clear, but I get that now. But my premise was that even in school they kind of teach that African Americans come from Africa, so it's not like this. The society is teaching you that you're a native. They're teaching you that you do come from Africa, or a majority of your lineage come from Africa. So I kind of don't see that the American society telling you otherwise. And even what Elvis said, even in school, you learn that the natives, a lot of them were robbed from their own trades, right? They stole their fur trade, they stole their trade, they stole their land, right? So it's not a victorious story of the natives. So I don't get the concept of why certain people kind of romanticize the natives when, no disrespect to the natives, Africans did more so to protect their land and preserve their land and their people than the natives did. They have a more
But
victorious
but
story than the natives did. So
but
I
we
don't
see
get the
we,
premise
we
of
see we see that our people, a lot of Western blacks, they really gravitate to the one drop rule. You know what I mean? It's been historical that okay, the more if you're mixed, if you're not whole black, and again, this kind of goes into the colorism. If you're not wholly black, it's more desirable. And obviously, we have a lot of people will uh, make the correlation between like maybe their grade of hair that would indicate, oh, I've got Native American in my family, or Native American in my bloodline. And I mean, obviously, we do know that there were some relationships and there were some connections between Africans and the Native Americans, and that actually Native Americans held slaves as well. So obviously, there may have been some mixing, but it's not to the level that is being projected as. And when I'm saying the proximity, okay, what we learn in school, for instance, about our connection to Africa is negative. What we learn is that we are the products of the slave trade, and we learn all of the heinous things that took place then. And we also learned that essentially there's nothing to offer on the continent. Okay. So people that don't want to be associated with that, just like the other gentleman said that was up here, was it Elvis? He was saying that the perception of the continent is negative, and that's why people don't want to be associated. So by trying to estrange yourself and then claiming something else, I'm not an African because I'm indigenous. You're basically trying to disassociate yourself from those people that were a part of the slave trade and say that we were already here. So I'm not a product of the slave trade.
If I
And
can
And
kick in there for a second, I wanted to just mention the following aspect. In the Western Hemisphere, those of us who with descendancy of slavery combinations, or in a more straight out line, outside of the United States, one drop rule is not even known.
right.
Um, the in Caribbean, Central America, and South America, identity is transformed by mainly nationality, and then it's also constructed by the micro and the macro notion of we're all Latin Americans in that sense. I have noticed that Anglo speaking, especially in the Western hemisphere, are the only ones who subject themselves to this stupidity of the one drop rule, that it's only a rule that applies within the frontiers of the United States as a legal measure. But outside of the United States, that matters absolutely nothing. There are other factors that determine. And just to conclude, in regards to the idea of transracial, first, race is a obsolete term that means absolutely nothing, and I've noticed this also from the Anglo-speaking section of the Western Hemisphere. They confuse a lot race with ethnicity. Can a person have multiple ethnicities? Yes, but having those multiple ethnicities means or signifies that that person's family has grades of connection to the heritage of that particular ethnicity. The concept of race is also, just to conclude, the concept of race and the categorizations of the United States is just like the imperial metric system: outdated, worthless, and senseless in every sense of the word. And they only keep on using it because there are a whole bunch of stubborn people who do not have a clue how to break free from the chains of miscategorizations, impositions, and colonial mindsets. Thank you.
yes, and peace to the panel. I'll make this brief. Now, I know that did so is not, but to the sister African superstar, are you a descendant of U.S. chattel slaves?
I don't know. I consider myself African, just to
No,
simplify it all.
I never asked you that. With all due respect, I'm speaking about a particular lineage and ancestry. Are you a descendant of U.S. chattel
Bro,
slaves?
hold on, bro. Ain't you Puerto Rican?
No, I'm a mulatto, brother.
Bro, I spoke to you before. You claimed you Puerto Rican, bro.
I live in Puerto Rico,
I
yes, but let's not be derailed.
come on, no,
Everyone,
no, no, no. You said
let's
you
have some
Puerto Rican.
decorum, please. Let's have some decorum.
Yeah,
With all due
Nah,
I
respects,
will interrupt.
yes. The question is, with all due respects to the sister African superstar,
I've
are you a
already answered you. I've already
no?
answered you.
You said what you
I'm
consider
I'm
yourself to
I'm
be.
I'm born and raised in the U.S., but I know that my origins come from the continent. So I've simplified it all. I don't have all the
Well,
hangups and confusion of those
so you
things.
didn't answer the question, and this is,
I
and
answered
I
the
move for.
question. I answered the
Just
question as much
let's
as
not
I'm going to
argue.
answer.
Let's
I'm
not argue.
African.
Let's
I'm
not
not
argue.
arguing with you. I've
All
told
right, so
you.
please let me have the time since you spoke already. And the point is this: we, as descendants of U.S. chattel slaves, we have to speak about our own lineage. When we take a DNA test, we have African, European, and Native American ancestry. This is undeniable. So when you get, with all due respect, when I use this term, I'm not being disrespectful. When you get tethers like African Superstar and Ditso speaking on our
Well,
lineage,
let
we
me
have
let
to
me let, let
understand.
me let, let me let, me- let me interject.
Of course, of
Yeah,
course.
and I would like to interject
Well,
after
hold
that.
on, hold on. Well, let me. I'm gonna pass the mic, but she African Superstar is not a tether. But for what you consider, what you would
Well,
consider.
she admitted on her page that she was African and not a descendant of U.S. chattel slaves.
Yes, she's not a tether. Okay, but go ahead.
But she's not a descendant of U.S. chattel slaves.
She's not a.
Per
She's
her,
not. A, she's not a tether. She's not a tether. Okay.
well, aside from the
Neither
term
neither
tether,
African Superstar or myself are tethers. But
aside from the term,
one quick
one mic
question
at a
about
time, and I'll pass
Let
the mic.
Mulatto finish, and I'm gonna
yes.
pass the mic.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. One mic at a time, and I'll pass the mic. The point is, whether you like the term tether or not, African Superstar is not a descendant of U.S. chattel slaves. Neither is Ditso. So when we speak about,
Mulatto.
I'm not being contentious.
No.
What is your
Mulatto,
point? What is your point with
mulatto,
that?
I'm trying to make my point, but I
We're
keep
talking
getting
there's a
mulatto is a
interrupted.
specific
mixed
topic
guy.
here.
Yeah, I'm trying to make
There's
my
a
Claim he's
point, but I
Puerto
specific
keep getting
Rican,
topic here.
interrupted.
married to a Puerto Rican woman. So
Yeah,
how are you so proud to be
and I'm
MVA
trying
your
to make
woman
my
ain't
point, but I'm
lesbian?
being
Can we keep the
I'm being
decorum,
cut off
please?
by triggered people that have no
No,
decorum.
You
nobody's
false
triggered but
claimer,
you.
bro. You a
Yes,
false claimer, man.
look, you have no
Because the
decorum.
topic, you're
I
not
spoke to you
talking about the
before.
topic.
Yes,
You
let me
claim you're not
respond to the
even.
topic. The
What
topic
the
is
topic is Africa to blame for the Black Americans' dysmorphia? That's the
yes, and
topic.
the answer is emphatically yes. If Africans did not sell the ancestors of descendants of U.S. chattel slaves to the Europeans, we would not be mixed raced. We would not be
Look,
able to
bro.
claim these different lineages.
Bro, mixed
Look,
race
Checkmate.
exists
you
everywhere,
you
even in
That's
you are
Africa,
you
bro.
are
What are you
barely
talking about?
black,
yes,
brother.
yes,
You are barely black. You don't
Mixed race
have the
I'm a
exists in
authority to
mulatto. You see
Africa,
my
claim
name.
or to tell
You see
people
my
who is
name.
black.
Europe.
You're
Yes, you see my name.
50% at most.
I'm a
50% at
mulatto.
most black. You don't
I'm
have
less
the
than
authority to
50.
tell who is black or
I didn't
who
say
is a
anything about
descendant of what.
blackness. I said nothing about blackness. You're
If
not
I may,
listening.
real quickly,
You're a
Mulatto.
mule. The word mulatto means
Yes,
mule.
yes. Just
So
like African Americans are
you said
mules.
that you're a mix, meaning
Elvis,
that
Just like
you're a
African
mix
can you
Americans
of
give me a
are.
black and
moment?
white.
Elvis, I'm gonna crush this point
A
real
lot
quick.
of
According to the
Africans
First,
DNA test
also
results,
came.
Mulatto,
black Americans are racially
just
mixed.
1v1
Checkmate.
for a few moments with me.
Africans are mixed. They
Most
One,
black
all
people are
came
Mulatto,
from
80%, not
Sinai. We're not
Elvis,
50%.
saying
can you
that
Hey,
give
they
me
guys,
one
Exactly.
minute?
That means they're
guys,
mixed,
let me
brother.
hold on. What? Let me. Ditso, you got 45 seconds. I'm gonna pass
Thank
it
you,
in two.
Mulatto.
45 seconds.
The chattel slavery, Atlantic slave trade, did it only happen in what is today modern day United States, or did it happen in any other place in the Western Hemisphere?
Africans sold Africans all around the world, even into Asia,
You
even
did not
into
answer the
Arabia.
question.
That's a
Did
direct answer.
no?
It
That's a
happened all
lie.
around the world, not just the
Mule
US, all around the world.
again. Mule.
They sold
Another
their own people all around the world.
again. You are moving the goalposts. My question is specific. Did the
Yes.
Atlantic slave trade happen only and specifically in modern day United States, or did it happen in any other location in the Western Hemisphere? I did not ask about Africa. I did not ask anywhere else in the place. I
Yes.
specifically
Let me
asked
respond to that.
yes or
Uh,
no.
yes, I can tell that your English is not your first language. I
Yes,
clearly said yes, it happened all around the world,
no.
including in Latin
You're moving
America,
the goalposts. You're
including
not
in the
answering.
Caribbean.
Okay, so
Yes.
again, let me reinstate this question.
Yes.
Did Atlantic slave trade in the Western Hemisphere, I'm being very specific,
Yes.
only happen in the United States, or did it happen across what we call the Western Hemisphere, aka America, from Argentina up to Canada plus the Caribbean? Yes or no?
Bitch, I just said Latin America. You not listening? That's outside the US.
You can tell he's triggered because
Yeah,
you
make
said
it
that
make
thing
your
Yeah. All
point.
about
right,
the one
God
drop
damn.
rule.
let me
Excuse
pass
me.
the mic.
We're gonna let somebody else.
Yeah, pass the
Excuse
mic,
me.
please.
I'm passing the mic. Go ahead, Zoo. Zoo 221. Go ahead.
I think this is an example of some of the kind of behavior people are talking about. When people say, does Africa have fault? I think Africa does have some fault, but the most of the blame comes on us. And behaviors like this are not new, but they're definitely more prevalent now. Um, with the internet and I think it was African Superstar that mentioned proximity. I think that I really, and I say this a lot, but people who are coming into to the United States from other black countries should really take a trip to the Jim Crow Museum and do some studying in that direction just to understand how intense race relations were in this country, right?
Hmm.
And how close that played out. If you listen to James Baldwin, he talks about how this was in between families, right? And for this, so something kind of bothered me about what you were saying, because you said all of that, but you didn't mention colorism, right? So doesn't that kind of play into the one drop rule?
One,
Absolutely.
first step.
The hierarchy, the hierarchy, the closer to white you are, the better it is. You know what I
So,
mean? So
Very
since
true.
yeah,
Very true.
indeed.
since it
Indeed.
was addressed to me in that sense, I'm gonna answer. First, the first question I asked in regards of this whole thing, mulatto confirmed. The sentences of slavery in the Western Hemisphere are all over in 35 nations. Do not interrupt, mulatto. And two, in the matters of the problematic and horrendous issues of racism in the last in the last 500 some odd years, and more specifically in the last 200 and 250 years, I could go on for hours about colorism. But you bringing it up, it only moves. It shows that you want to move the goalpost. Hell, I can give a master class in regards of how the differences of um, in the moments of Latin Americans' independences, the majority of these countries abolished slavery from the get-go of the Constitution, contrary to what happened in the United States, that did not abolish slavery from the ratification of the Constitution of 1784. And it took 90 years and a civil war to end that slavery on a process that majority of Latin America and Caribbean had already abolished slavery on their processes of independence. And not only that, you saw England abolishing slavery, and that abolishment movement had already been widespread by the moment Civil War had happened. So we can recognize the impacts of racism and the differences of how it happened between each country in Latin America. And in matters of colorism, oh, I can give countless.
Well, I wasn't just talking about colorism for the sake of colorism. I was more so relating it to the idea that you brought up about
What idea?
aberrant behaviors and self-negating behaviors, right? People that say that I'm not what the DNA test says, even though the DNA test is freaking scientific, right?
Look,
And contrary to African Superstar, I definitely know some Caribbean people who kind of espouse these kind of ideas and whatnot, and even in Europe. So I don't know. It would be weird for me to think that there are not people in South America who don't feel the same way. Although I do acknowledge that because of the proximity, and I'll add also because of the um the opposition that freedom fighters, educators, everyone that was black centered in the United States faced in the 60s and going forth.
so just to be
Dinus,
real,
1 second, brother. Dinus, I wanted 30 seconds. I think you missed the opportunity on one of the shows, and you know this information very well. There was a couple of brothers on the show that was arguing that slavery never happened because there's no evidence, there's no slave ships. My country of origin, well, not my country of origin, but my country, Liberia, right? When you had African Americans who repatriated to, went back home and founded that nation, they fought the slave trade. They freed people who was being taken into captivity from the Congo Basin, and now they have a prominent name in our country as the Congo people.
Exactly.
They fought people in the Gulf of Guinea. They slavers, people who lived on the land on the coastal areas. They fought them, about the slave trade. So slavery, in fact, did happen. So I can understand when people want to extricate themselves from the attachment to the continent or the history of slavery, but to try to erase the history One is, there's facts on the continent that people fought against slavery, especially in my country. People, was freed and repatriated from slave ships that was going to their destination and was brought to freedom in my country, what is now Liberia. You can't deny those facts. So when brothers come on the platform and try to say slavery never happened, there's no proof of it. We have living proof in my country.
And
So I just want
Elvis.
to make that point.
No, that's a
Let,
great
let, let,
point.
let- no,
My
let me
bad.
pass.
Go ahead.
Let me pass it to
Go ahead.
Kofi. Go ahead, Kofi.
But there's living proof. There's living proof here though. There's plantations. People used to do. I think it's just gotten a little bit more
Yeah, I agree. I
tense
agree.
conversation recently.
Yeah.
And I
So
want to respond to that point he made because that was a good point.
Well,
But
well,
go
no.
ahead,
Let
Kofi.
me pass. Let me pass it to Kofi. Then you can respond. Go ahead, Kofi.
yeah. So to respond to the question, is it Africa's fault that um, the quote unquote FBA doesn't want to acknowledge Africa? And I would say, yes, the CIA and the United States government gave the regime party of Samuel Doe a total of $500 million to pretty much put that idea in effect, to say that the blacks who came from the Americas to establish Liberia and hold power for 150 years under the True Whig Party, well, they aren't African, and these people enslaved you, and that's why you're going through so many struggles. Now that argument exists today. If you ask anyone about Liberia, they're gonna regurgitate that they're going to regurgitate that point, as if we weren't people that were taken from the African continent and then we came back and fought what was going against us, which oppressed us, which was slavery. Now, you can't have this Americo, our Congo versus country, our Congo versus native argument without also accepting us as native people to the African continent. And when we gained our freedom and we got back to the African continent, we became African again. But the popular idea is to say that it was us versus them, as if we didn't belong. Now, we have a 200-year history on the African continent through Liberia. And every time I try to raise that in the FBA crowd, the FBA platforms, they totally ignore it, and they doing that on purpose because it don't fit into their narratives. So you could kind of use Liberia as a case study to kind of debunk and to kind of like see how people are hypocritical on this situation. Yes, we deserve to have an ethnic group of our own, but our ethnic group did go to Africa, and we had many achievements on the African continent. Other than Liberia, in Ethiopia, Kenya, South Africa, and other West African countries, and as well as the Congo. So we just have to use history to kind of grab what's ours. Yes, we are natives in the United States because we built the country, but we are also natives to the African continent. And I feel like it's fair and it's just to take on both. Before we were in America surrounded by white people, there were rape and there were mixing going on the African continent way before we've got to the Americas. There was light skinned people. There were plenty of mulattoes for centuries.
Exactly.
So
Yes, sir.
I
I
just
would
want
take
to add that.
issue
That's
with
it.
the term mulatto. I mean, it's
We
outdated.
didn't
We need
ask you.
new.
Just so he didn't ask you
Can I can
respectfully.
I can I
And
say
I'm
something?
next. I was next, and it'll
Yeah,
be
when
brief.
I go to when I go to Ghana, I'm a citizen of Ghana. They ask
Much
me,
respect.
"Am I half caste?" And I get very angry at that, and I say, "No, both my parents are black." But it's not the word mulatto. It's the perception. People automatically assume that you must be half caste, but I have to just point out, no, look at the dungeons on this coast. That's why my skin is like this.
Yes, sir. And
Words matter,
Bro,
Is
and
there's
that a
light
words
skin,
final
talk.
there's light
word?
skinned
hold
black
on,
people in
I was
Africa
next.
though.
Pass
You
the
look
mic. I was
very
Exactly,
next.
exactly.
African.
I
With
tell
all
them,
due
look at your
respect,
presidents,
hold
JJ
on. The host said
Rollins.
I was next, though. With all due
No, I'm
respect,
saying
But
full
JJ
blooded
Rollins
No,
was
no,
next,
no,
light-skinned
Chris.
black
God,
people.
God, 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 God.
Uh-huh.
I said mulatto could
Yeah.
respond.
thank
Go
you.
ahead, mulatto.
It'll be brief. And like I say, I never try to be long winded. I'm gonna respond to the brother Elvis's point. Um, as the DNA test revealed, descendants of U.S. chattel slaves have undeniable African, European, and Native American ancestry, but you have many Black Americans that deny their African ancestry. In my humble opinion, I believe that this is a trauma based response to being sold to Europeans by Africans, people that we perceive as our own people. So we see this as a betrayal. We see this as treasonous. Even today, you have Africans that come to the US, they become law enforcement agents, they become COs, and they are complicit in the mass incarceration of descendants of US chattel slaves while cosplaying for us, pardon me, while cosplaying as us and applying for Martin Luther King scholarships, checking the Black American box instead of checking other and writing their own ethnicity in. So these are some of the reasons I believe humbly that Black Americans, some of them, deny their African ancestry.
You know, brother, I think that's an excellent point. That's the smartest thing you said this evening.
Keep
And that's
listening.
the point. That's the point that we need to get to, because I think I've said it. It might sound idealistic, but it's healing. There's collective healing that needs to happen. A lot of people have that pain and that sense of betrayal of Africans for selling their ancestors into slavery, and part of it boils down to that. As somebody said on the show the other day, they want to take away the guilt from the Africans for slavery, so they're claiming not to be Africans, so the Africans can't feel ashamed or feel guilty for selling their
No,
their
no.
people into
And
slavery.
Can I
You
say
But
something?
my
I just
last
feel
point
like
here is my last point here is that Kofi mentioned something, right? And I just want not to go on a Liberian tangent, but when you say that the people didn't consider the American Liberians to be native, it's not true. The nomenclature of native came from the American Liberians. They put the different ethnic groups into tribes and it called them the 16 tribes of the nation. They excluded themselves. For the first 133 years of the country, they had the power. They made the social structure and they did not include themselves as a tribe of Liberia. And that's why right now there's a movement to make the Congo people an official tribe, because they excluded themselves because they felt like being a tribe was beneath them. So don't say that people were trying to say that they're not native to the land. They made a social structure, and the way they set it up is the same way it's going right now in the country. But they're African people. They've been on the continent for over 200 plus years. They've intermarried. They've had more African admixture into their bloodlines. They're African people. That's it.
All right,
Let me let
possible.
me
I
pa-
can,
let me pass it to Chrissy. Go ahead, Chrissy.
Yes, hi everyone.
Hey, how are
Um,
you?
yeah, I think the conversation about Africans or um, being responsible or at fault or whatever. I think one thing that we're missing a lot of times, just as Black people collectively, is scholarship. A lot of times we don't do research, and especially in America, people generally in America have no clue what happens outside of these borders. They don't care to know what happens. They don't know the history. They don't care to know the history. Africans weren't just kind of just chilling and sold, even just kind of understanding the structure of how people saw themselves and saw tribes, and the concept of race is really something that white people brought, but fine. Um, if Africa is responsible for how maybe many Black Americans don't see Africa in a positive light, whichever, just the way you have many Black Americans in America who say to Black immigrants, you have to understand our history, you have to understand what happened, and these are the current conditions that we have. The same with Africa. Africa went through
true.
centuries of colonization and extermination. Belgium exterminated half of Congo's population. So they themselves have had their own traumas. There was slavery on the continent. Like, they might call it something different, but if you have people working at the threat of death or threat of being amputated and you're not paying them, that's slavery, right? So all of these things happen. The caste system, the color complex, the idea that you're not human, all of those kind of things also happened on the continent. And then after so-called independence, every proper leader that rose was assassinated, just like in the United States. So I think if there is more scholarship and we're reading more instead of maybe, I think a lot of people are waiting for YouTube videos to spoon feed them this information. If we proactively really have an interest in learning about each other and learning each other's histories, there will be more understanding. Now, where Africa is concerned, I do hear, I'm from the Caribbean. So my ancestors were also sold into slavery. Okay. And just to be clear, it wasn't clear cut. Some of those who was doing the selling found themselves at the bottom of the ship as well. So you don't know who your ancestor is. Were they the ones that were just sold? Were they the ones that were selling and then end up in the bottom of the ship eventually? Or were they the ones that not everything is not sold? Were they the ones that were fighting, right? And they lost, right? A lot of Brazilians, in addition to Yoruba, they also have Angolan ancestry. And the Angolans were literally prisoners of war because they fought against the Portuguese. The Portuguese were initially their trading partners and turned on them. And they fought and they lost because they didn't have the artillery that the European have. It's the artillery that has allowed the European to colonize the world, because he had used guns, which he didn't create. Actually, the Arab guns come from the Arabs, but they use it to kill animals. He used it. They said we can master slaughtering people through organized violence. He's a master of organized violence, and he's better than the rest of us when it comes to that, right? So you don't know what kind of combination of ancestry that you have in that way. But I will say, when it comes to, I don't know if it's an animus or a lack of forgiveness where Africans are concerned, I don't see the same level of animus towards white people. One thing I can say the continent has done, African leaders have come out and apologized. And mind you, it wasn't the entire continent. It was mostly the western part where many of our ancestors came from. They've apologized for slavery. They've allotted land. Ghana has allotted land. Ethiopia has allotted land. I'm sure that there are other countries that have allotted citizenship. These are tangible things. This is the 40 acres and a mule that many African countries have offered. The white man has never offered you. So I don't understand. I know that there's healing that needs to be done, but for you to kind of, hold a African of today hostage with this whole slavery thing, he himself has gone through his own traumas. I guess the white man would still say they're not benefiting from anything. The people who are at the top of the food chain who are benefiting are white people. All of this animus needs to be geared in that direction because they're not sorry. They've never apologized and they've never given you anything.
And Christy, can I ask this very briefly?
Can I
Was the
say something,
European?
man?
I
Can I
was.
say something?
I pass the mic right to you. I promise.
I was asking, I don't know, Prince, on the back
Hold
chat.
on, please.
Can
One
we
mic at a
ask
time.
Well, hold
your?
on. Let Mulatto
That
ask
God
was
a
well.
damn.
question.
That was well said,
Man,
sis.
well,
I agree with what you said.
Mulatto, ask your question, Chrissy.
Thank you. And it'll be so brief. Chrissy, were the Africans and the Europeans not co-conspirators in the transatlantic chattel slave trade?
In many regards, absolutely. In many regards, absolutely.
I appreciate your honesty.
There were tribes that were co-conspirators. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So it's
Thank
natural
you,
to
Pussy.
have.
We were also conspirators. We come from the Mali empires. We come from a couple of empires. We had slaves when those empires fell. We just didn't have enough slaves to fight our rivals, and those who lost just didn't have enough slaves and warriors.
And
So
Kofi, when you
that's
say
just
we,
it.
Kofi, when you say we, please be specific. Are you speaking about Africans or Afro diasporans?
I'm talking about before we came to the Americas.
Exactly.
Before we came to Americas, and those who before we got captured, we definitely owned slaves as well.
So Kofi, the point is
We owned
this.
slaves.
So the point is, and we already articulated this, Africans and Europeans were co-conspirators in the transatlantic chattel slave trade, so it's natural for the descendants of the transatlantic chattel slave trade to have a degree of apprehension towards unification with either side. Just like you would never say I was a fool or you was a fool for not unifying with Caucasians, even though we have Caucasian ancestry. So we have to have that same energy for the Africans.
So I
Can
want
I
to
So
add something to what you're
hold
saying?
on.
Can I
You
add
know,
I
something?
want to.
yes, it works on both
Can
sides.
I
I
add,
agree.
So
Yes.
hold
there's
on.
one
I
side
really
that
would like.
might I just add
Let
something
the
real
sister
quick?
speak.
there
Well,
is
Keep
go
using
one
the word
side.
African and not
Okay,
using the word
imagine.
tribes. There's different tribes.
Okay,
clearly.
Dinus, you got to
Yeah,
control the flow, Dinus.
yes.
Please.
And
Yeah.
the
if I
sister
can
was
just
speaking. Now go
respond,
ahead, Chrissy.
you asked me a question.
She
So
just finished
imagine you
spoke
have
though.
two people.
Can I add something, please?
Okay.
Well, let Chrissy
Miss
speak, then
Chrissy.
I'll pass it to you, Prince Speed, and I'll
Okay.
pass it to Ditso. Go ahead, Chris.
Imagine you have
Okay.
two people, right? You've been in a fight with. One is apologetic and tries to repair the situation and tries to bring repair to you because they know they've hurt you. And the other side don't give an fuck about you. So there's a distinction there between the African, if you want to say the African, and the European. So I don't think the equal animus, maybe apprehension, whatever, as I've said before, white Europeans have never offered you anything.
Well, what
They're
you're
not
saying is not true
sorry.
historically, though.
They never
African
fell through
leaders
with
of
anything.
today, right?
What?
Because a lot of these nations, they were not nations, they were different tribes of today, have apologized, have offered land, have offered resources to the diaspora as an olive branch to say we're sorry. We're
But
shameful of what happened. The European has never done these things for you. The
well,
European don't care.
I would like to address that.
No, no,
Now,
you got to let Prince
No,
come
no,
in
yeah,
though.
no,
all
Yeah.
right.
let me
Well,
pass
go ahead.
it.
Let's pass the mic then.
Let me pass it 1,000%, Prince. Yeah, go
Yes.
ahead.
And please, someone address
Yeah,
what she said.
Chrissy, I respect you and I salute you for coming on and saying that because I say that all the time and people kind of laugh it off. People under my, I think I left it in the comment with Dinus that people minimize that the history of what it really happened. They try to make it like he keeps saying African, 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 and diaspora. There's certain people that's in the diaspora who are descended of slave traders. So they don't understand that it was a tribal war. It's not. It wasn't just Africans selling Africans like they think it is. It was different tribes selling different tribes. Certain tribes defending their own people, and as retribution for those that were taken, they'll attack another tribe and sell those other people from a different tribe. So the narrative that they're even being fed is a fictional narrative, and I think it hinders them from even trying to make peace with Africans more so than the Caribbean. Because I'm also of Caribbean descent, and the concept of tribe is a thing that exists in the Caribbean, and I think it doesn't really exist in America. And because of that, they keep using the word African, and they minimize the fact that it was different tribes warring. That's my main point. I'm gonna pass the mic. That's what I had
10,
to
10,
say.
10 seconds, right? I think one thing that people
No,
forget.
no, it's Ditso's
Okay,
turn.
go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Dinus.
Yeah, I'm gonna make this real quickly. First, Chrissy, on point on everything that you said. Prince, also very well. I just want to address the phone. This misconstruction of apprehension against the tribes that may have or had contributions towards the Atlantic slave trade, it shows a complete and utter ahistorical uh, understanding of what was happening on that moment. So, added to the fact that in the recent times, many of those African countries have come out and said, "Yes, we, our people in the past did wrong." It it fuels into a whole series of conversations because let us be realistic. In the Western Hemisphere, what we call America, the U.S. citizen has hijacked the identity, has kidnapped that identity, and has utilized its hegemony to erase the identity of Caribbeans, Central Americans, and South Americans, that at the end, they're all Americans. Understanding that problem is also understanding that we need better deconstruction of the history of how we understand that history, particularly in the Western Hemisphere. And one of those points happened right now, initially. where I asked the question: was Atlantic slave trade only exclusive to the United States, or did it happen anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere? And the answer was it happened everywhere in the Western Hemisphere. In fact, data tells us that the majority of populations of African descendants of slavery, be it mixed or not mixed, radicates in Latin America, not in the United States. That's a fact. Over 150 million people right now out of the 660 million people, yes, divided in 33 nations. Understanding those concepts, and Sue, another day we can have the whole conversation on the problems of colorism emanating from the caste system established by the Spanish, Portuguese here in Latin America, and the French. That's yes. The problems reside a lot um, in how those identities were attempted to be squashed by the white Latin Americans and by the Eurocentric Latin Americans, alongside with the impacts of the exporting of racism and xenophobia from the United States.
Let,
So
let,
Okay, let me get 30 seconds, please.
let me pass the mic. Go
that's
ahead.
another conversation.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
okay. Diners, I just want to be for real, right? Let's get down to it.
Well, let me read the super chats real quick.
Okay, okay.
Oluwole, thank you for the $5 holla. AJ, thank you for the $5 holla. Why aren't white people not held accountable for the atrocities that are going on now? Uh, they are. Let's see here. Go ahead, Elvis.
All right. Look, I'm an African, and we are 75% of the, we hold 75% of the blame for slavery. And the reason I'm saying this is because we forget the Arab slave trade happened before the transatlantic slave trade. So we had a history of selling our people into slavery.
Yes,
The
sir.
the reason you don't see the descendants of Arab slave because of what happened with the massacre of the Zinj in Iraq, what is now Iraq. They became so populous that they killed a lot. They went there and massacred a lot of those Africans who were once enslaved, in those caliphates. And what they did was they castrated the African slave. They held our women in harems. People say arguably it was worse than the chattel slavery. So Africa has a history of selling their people into slavery. This is not the first time. This was not a one-off mistake. We did it before with the Arabs, and we did it with the Europeans. So let's not try to take
That's
the
my
blame away from ourselves. We were culpable, and we should be on our knees apologizing to the descendants of the people we sold into slavery.
that's
So
my say
please,
so real quick.
let's not try to
Can
obfuscate
I say
ourselves
something real
when
quick?
when it
All
comes
we
to
ask
slavery.
is to all we ask is to come back to the places that we helped establish. We helped establish the first country on the African continent, which is Liberia. And I should have Liberian citizenship first instead I have Ghanaian citizenship.
Yes, yes.
And
I
that's how we
agree.
start.
I
And
Yeah, but
whoever's
you,
No,
next,
my,
let
no,
my,
let me
my,
go after whoever next, please.
let me pass the mic to Shaw. Go ahead, Shaw.
So, okay, that's a very interesting assessment or history that you've given because, and I'm not saying it's not true. However, there are nuances to that. And historically speaking, we have a 8,000 year history of writing and high civilization. 8,000 years. We're only talking about the last 1,500 years. And so we need to go back further to see if that's the case that we've been selling our people like that. I would like to see that. But again, part of the statements that people are making is that Africans, and they're not distinguishing or differentiating and giving nuance to it. It was a few Africans in view of all of the people, just like in the United States. Not everybody could own a slave, could afford to own slaves. There were more people who weren't slave owners than there were people who were. There was only a few people who were slave owners in the big picture. Just like in Africa, there were only a few people that were at the forefront of this mass amount of people going out through them. But there was a large amount and more people that was taken that weren't sold. There were more people that were, and I would argue that based on some classes that I've had, more people who fought, more people who were just small groups, total ethnic groups completely gone, of 3,000, 4,000 people, not even there anymore. They're here in the diaspora. So we're not talking about the nuances of that, and we need to speak the truth about it. Because if you say Africans did it, then you need to be able to say that most of the Africans did it, and that's not the case. There were a few. It was the exception to the rule. I'll land right there.
I think that's a great point. I think, but what these where these arguments often leave us is in our feelings, as they rightly should, though. But I think we often end in a place where we're saying, okay, I'm just waiting on the Africans to do this, or I'm waiting on the Black Americans to do this. Why is there not some kind of uh, organization of alliance and friendship, or common interest that works in that direction?
Sue, are you
May, may,
aware what happened
may I answer
between?
that, please?
I just want to answer real quickly. Sue, are you
Okay,
aware
go
what
ahead.
happened between the EU and the Central American community of states just less than 2 years ago in
Uh,
Belgium?
Let me know.
Alongside CARICOM and the CELAC, which is the geopolitical organization of Latin American states and Caribbean, we had the third summit in Belgium between EU and us. And on there, we clearly said and we established that Europe still owes us reparations for the grave consequences of the Atlantic slave trade. No, not less than 2 years ago. And that's on the highest diplomatic meeting between elected officials of each states in Latin America as well
Hmm.
as Caribbean with European elected officials. So
That
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 happened 2 years ago, less than 2 years
okay.
ago.
And I
Okay.
think Shaw was next. Let me go after Shaw,
But
please.
hold on, because I think because that's
Well,
excellent. That's
actually,
great. That's
actually, girl speak is next. Who-
let me just land real quick. That's excellent. But what I'm speaking to is something more along the nature of building some kind of infrastructure that answers some of these questions before they become problems, right? Um, Not necessarily reparations, which is more a conversation with the establishment. I'm talking about how people like us who are on this panel, who are on both sides of the Atlantic, can answer some of these issues without getting too deep into it. And there are some organizations, but I think we do need to talk about why those organizations aren't being um, more talked about, more focused on, and why we're not thinking about um, resolving some of these issues, because I think we can. And I'll land with that.
Go ahead, girl speak. Unmute yourself. Girl speak. Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, brothers and sisters, I just want to say I had to come into the chat because I was blocked. I had to come in the StreamYard because I was blocked from the chat. Please do not suppress our voices when we have
I don't I
these
don't I
type of
don't I don't I don't
conversations.
I don't know who blocked you. Go ahead.
I'm whoever did it, I'm letting them know. First of all, as a Black American, I am a descendant of enslaved peoples. That means that our people were without the power to move around freely and exercise liberty. They were enslaved, they were owned by other people. That meant miscegenation or rape for the profit of new humans was a big part of our enslavement. I posted in the chat links from pbs.org where a scholar who does the African history or Know Your Roots series explains that out of all of the 10.5 million people that came out of Africa, 300,000 people made it to North America. So we are less than 5% of the slave trade.
That's
Today
not
we for,
true.
today we are
Let her
40 to
talk.
50 million. Today we are 40 to 50 million people strong. When we deny our grandmother's rape, you know, you see it in our complexion. We change in complexion. We're like birds. We like feathers of a bird over here. You can't tell me to deny my great grandfather who was Irish on my mother's side, or my great grandfather on my father's side who was Blackfoot Indian because I look more African. It's offensive as a survivor of that for you to just say now you whole African. I wanted to make that point.
What's your
Second,
DNA?
my DNA is my mother and father, but it take two parents, four grandparents, 16 great grandparents, and
Your
so on.
DNA
We come from our
test.
ancestors.
Your DNA
Brother,
test.
I
Just
know.
make your second point. Don't let them derail you. We
Okay,
understand you.
thank you. The second point is Africa. Right now, Africa is changing. It's been a new moon, it's been eclipses, and all of this other stuff going on. Ibrahim Traore is the best example of what an African nation should look like. Ibrahim has brought the AES together, and so Niger and Mali, they have kicked the French out, and they are fighting for African interests. While they're doing that, you have Nigerians, Tinubu, fighting against them, looking to bring the French to Nigeria to set up military bases to fight the freedom of Burkina Faso. You have in Rwanda right now with Kagame, they are literally terrorizing the Congo people to the point where the Congo president is begging Trump to come in. You can have our whole nation full of mineral resources because
Mhm.
we can't get along with MS-20. They are exterminating Congo. And I never hear concern about those on the African continent. In Libya, when we talk about international politics and the impact of Black Americans vote, we voted Barack Obama in. Barack Obama destroyed Libya. He killed Gaddafi. It brought slavery back. Literal slavery. People are being sold for $200, $400. They're being held for ransom up to $6,000, and it's not a secret. It's all over Twitter. You can see them being burned. You can see them being tortured. You can see them being hung, and there is never a conversation about that.
Fact.
It's always coming back to Black Americans and trying to make us identify with a continent we have not been to in 500 years. It doesn't matter what your
Uh,
DNA say.
huh?
We are in America.
That's
We
where you
are in
lost me, sis.
we are
Five
in
hundred
My
America.
years?
Let her
my
land her
response to
plane,
her.
please. Let her
Oh,
land her plane.
Based off of if you want to fight the American government for reparations, you would have to lay claim to the lineage of those who came from 1619 who were enslaved in this country. They're not taking the Pequot Indians who are also dark skinned and considering them in reparations. They're talking about those 300,000 people who came to North America and in the United States who were enslaved, who suffered Jim Crow, who suffered segregation, who were called routinely Negroes and coloreds. That's us. That's where our reparation claim lays. It lays in the fact that we are descendants of
We have to
those
be able
type
to
of
think
people.
beyond reparations, though.
I'm
So
not
can
worried
I
about
can I
reparations.
I'm not
can
saying
I'm
I
going to
I'm
reiterate
giving
it.
you
respond?
a
I'm going to
hypothetical.
Can I
reiterate and
respond to
hang
the
up.
sister?
Let me
All right,
say
go
what
Um,
I'm
ahead,
going to say, and I'm
respond,
going to hang
brother.
up
Well,
because
well,
you
you,
cut
yeah,
well,
me
you
off
like,
twice.
well,
just a
let her
quick
finish first.
quick.
Let her finish first.
My fault.
Please.
I'm a mute.
How
Where
long are you gonna
is
go?
I'm almost done, brother, because I know y'all like to talk. Where is today's Black African liberation struggle for the Africans in the continent? In South Africa, you see them fighting tooth and nail, but even Nigerians can't come to South Africa and set up shop. Zimbabweans can't come to South Africans and set up shop. Why? Because the white people have been there since the 1600s. We as Black Americans, our scholars laid the foundation for us to say every civilization on this planet started as Black. That's where y'all getting this from. Every people
No.
we give honor and homage to the Africans who science says, Leakey says, once they left the African continent, they brought civilizations across the world. So everybody in the world has the same DNA structure. Their mitochondrial DNA relates back to a Black African woman. So all of civilization comes out of Africa. That's why we say we're the first Europeans, we're the first Australians, we're the first Indians, because it was us traveling out of Africa that gave other populations birth. They all come from us. And I'll land with that.
Well, let me just say this real quick. Most of the black folks that I've seen taking DNA tests is 1 to 3% American Indian, and there's some that have no American Indian at all. and just African and European. That's why I asked what was your DNA test. The other thing is 300,000, and this might not even be true, but I'll concede the fact that 300,000 Africans were brought directly to the United States. Well, there were Africans that were brought from Barbados, Jamaica, and other islands, Haiti, into the United States over time, over and over and over again. That does not include the ones that, because when you hear this 300,000, they're saying that they brought them directly to the United States. They don't say they took them to the Caribbean first. So, and we all know that some of these areas in South Carolina, whatever, were started from slaves and from different islands.
May I?
We know the history of that. And then in Haiti, after the revolution, a lot of people came to Africans and Europeans came to Louisiana. And before the revolution, they had another wave of Africans that came into Louisiana. And that's just Louisiana. We're not even talking about other places in the country.
So, if I may, real quickly on this point, 12 million people were trafficked for slavery here in the Western Hemisphere. Uh, there were several hubs because people forget to talk about one thing. The transatlantic slave trade, once it arrived here, it became the trans-American slave trade, where then from different hubs, just like what would be modern day República Dominicana, Haiti, Barbados, strategic points in the Caribbean that then enable the mobilization of those slaves either to the northern section, central section, south section, and some of them remaining on those islands. That problem of that lack of knowledge of how that slave trade functioned is one of the main reasons why we see today the imposition of supremacy by some in the population of Anglo-speaking Americans. So in this sense, what you just said is beautiful. It's just going to the details, and we could go over it for hours.
And please let me jump in next. And
Hold on, let me add a point, please, real quick, man, real quick. And plus, you guys are mostly hyper focusing on the 13 colonies. Some of the Louisiana wasn't part of the United States. California wasn't part of the United States. Texas was not a part of the United States pre 1800s. So a lot of the history of American people are talking about only talking about the 13 colonies, and they even skip over the history of America under the rule of the English, right? Because America didn't fully become America until 1776. We, mama, relax. So I'm fast.
yeah, and just to be brief, and I'm noticing something that constantly happens when we speak about the genealogy of descendants of U.S. chattel slaves. You'll have people from different parts of the diaspora, such as Latin America, Haiti, the Anglo-speaking Caribbean. They want to shoehorn themselves into our discussions to derail us. Right now, the topic of the discussion is the genealogy of descendants of U.S. chattel slaves. Are Africans the reason? Are they the blame why some Black Americans, not Black Latinos, not Black Haitians, not Black Brazilians, Black
I have to
Americans?
counter that.
But
I'm sorry.
can I say
Let me
something real
complete
quick
the
though? Can I say
sentence.
something real quick?
Let me complete the
Hold on.
sentence. And this is
Sure,
the
Quincy,
problem.
are you still here,
This,
Quincy?
Nah, let him finish his point. He was getting to a point. Let him
and
finish.
and literally,
No, but he's
this is
speaking
the
as if they're
problem
the
right
only
here.
ones that were enslaved.
And this is
They
the
were not the
problem
only
right
ones that
here.
were enslaved.
I never said we was the only one.
Let him
I
finish.
never
Let him
said
finish.
listen. I never said we was the only slaves. We're speaking about slavery in a particular country. If we're speaking about slavery in Jamaica, I'm not going to jump into the discussion and say, it was also slavery in the U.S. If we talking about slavery in Brazil,
No.
I
But
will never. Okay, so brother, mute up and let me make my
hold on.
point,
But you
brother.
guys
Mute up and make my
romanticize natives.
mute up,
We don't do
mute up,
that.
and let me make my point, brother. Mute up and let me make my point. It'll be brief, brother. The point is, right now we're speaking of the lineage of descendants of United States chattel slaves, and are Africans to blame for some of us refusing to claim them due to them selling us into slavery. We're not speaking about Haitians right now or Latin Americans. Now go
Yeah,
ahead,
but I
brother.
brought
But
up the Caribbean.
why are you the
I
only
brought up
group
the
that
Caribbean as a
romanticize the
place in which
natives?
I brought
So
up the
let me.
Caribbean as a place in which Africans were brought to the United States because it was relevant, and I'm African American,
And they were brought
so
to the
So
U.S.,
it's
right?
they
hold
were
on. I
brought to the
want
U.S. Yeah,
Exactly. So we're speaking about slavery in the
yeah,
U.S.
but
Okay.
somebody from the Caribbean gave some more detail about that.
No,
So
So
he's
what?
speaking
let
about
me jump in.
slavery in the Caribbean.
He's
You're
talking
not
about
listening.
We're talking
slavery in
about
the
in the
Caribbean
US.
affected us because the slaves
Exactly. We're
from the
not
Caribbean
speaking
came to the
about.
United States,
So the
Hold
point
on.
is this:
and
they came to.
300,000
Go
Native
ahead.
Americans went to the Caribbean. They took
So hold on. Hold on.
Exactly.
300,000
So
Native
we're speaking
Americans from the
about
eastern
slavery in the
United
U.S.
States to the Caribbean. Native
So
Americans.
Yes,
let
we
me
know
So
jump
about
we're
in
that.
into this.
inextricably
So the point is,
tied. We're
n-
tied together. We're
Okay.
the
no
same
one's
people from
denying. Hold on.
Africa.
Let me say this. No
And
one's
if you know,
denying. Slow down, brother. No one's denying that Black Americans are genetically related to the diaspora. That's not the focal point of what we're talking about. The point is, if I say a Jamaican is the same as a Trinidadian, you say, nigga, no, they're not. Just like they are not the same, Black
but
Americans are not the
Hold on.
same
Hold on.
as.
I
but
want to
we're
kick
having
in
a
into this real
Hold
quickly.
conversation.
on, hold on.
Just give
Stop
me a
We're having a
moment.
interrupting me.
conversation, and
Stop
if they know
interrupting me
something,
because I
then
did not
let them
interrupt you.
speak. You know,
If
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 Okay.
they
I
you're
know
would like
talking
to
something.
about
I did
counter
not interrupt y'all.
Nana's
where
point
you
because
are indicting
I did not.
Africans
I
have
did
a
not
right to
interrupt
be
you,
a part of the
sis.
conversation to add further context. I think
So
that's
that's my
pretty
point.
clear.
We're speaking about
That's my point
the
too.
lineage of descendants of United
Right.
States
And
chattel
the
slaves.
question is Africa at fault? So Africans
And
being that they're the ones being
yes,
indicted as, the was it the
uh-huh,
plaintiff, right? They have
exactly.
there is a right of people who are African to be on the chat to add further context. I came here, I'm not talking about Jamaica,
And
right?
you admit it.
I was adding
Well, let's
further
have a dialogue,
context
sis.
about the
I'm not arguing with
continent,
you.
which is part of the
okay.
topic.
Exactly. It says on topic. You admitted that Africans are co-conspirators, meaning that they are mutually culpable with Europeans.
Okay.
They are the blame.
Okay.
That's the
Can I
focal
counter
point.
you,
We're
Some
not
my
talking
friend?
about
Africans.
Haiti
Hold
or
on.
Latin
I want to
America.
counter
We're not
this.
speaking about
Everyone.
any of that. We're speaking about descendants of U.S. chattel slaves. Now I pass the
Nobody
First.
mic.
brought up Haiti. Nobody
First.
brought up
And
If
I
I
Jamaica.
was
may.
I
I'll
was
If
let
I
just
Yes,
may,
the,
saying
real
the,
that
the
just
quickly.
to
Haitian
say
brought it
that
up.
because
Hold on.
Hey,
I
hey,
brought
Let me
up
hey,
answer
hey,
the
Haiti.
hey,
question
well,
so I
well,
can
hey,
counter
I
this.
brought up
let
Haiti.
me
is
let me
on
pass let me
Africa.
pass the
Exactly.
let me pass the mic to Ditso. Ditso, you got
Okay.
45 seconds. I'm gonna pass it to
In
Marie.
very simple sense. One, it is utterly and completely erroneous, this arbitrary decision being made on the table, because it clearly shows an attitude of supremacy following the lines of white supremacy and Eurocentric uh, ideas in that sense. So when we speak of the Atlantic slave trade in the Western Hemisphere, we're speaking about a minimum of 12 million people that were brought here. 95% of them were deposited between Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, and South America. 5% were deposited in North America.
Yes, we're speaking about the
No,
ones
hold
in
on.
the U.S. Only the
You
U.S.
asked
you don't even have
Mulatto.
to go that far. Just the fact that
Hold
you're
on.
talking about
Why?
No,
Olmecs.
Why is it
he's
that
right.
Mulatto gets
Hey,
Let's
hey,
narrow the
let
scope.
him speak.
Let
Let
him
him speak. And
speak.
I'm passing it to Marie. Go ahead,
okay?
Ditso.
So saying this, it clearly shows a disingenuous, dishonest approach in regards to the history of the Western Hemisphere and the Atlantic slave trade. It clearly shows that the intention of those that just want to center on the matters of the United States, their will is to erase the history and impose themselves as the only ones. When we here in Latin America, we are working alongside on pushing the histories of each one of us in no order of importance or supremacy over another. We can recognize the particularities of the reality that happened in the United States, which I spoke on before, which is your country did not abolish slavery from the get-go of independence, while many countries in Latin America did. That did mark a difference, yes.
All right,
But
let me pass the mic to Marie. Go
let
ahead,
me
Marie.
conclude this
No, no,
in
Murray.
20
And we're
seconds.
passing the
I gotta
mic.
pass the mic. I gotta
Pass the
pass
mic.
the mic. Go ahead, Marie. Go ahead, Marie. Unmute yourself.
Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and
Yes,
clear.
ma'am.
Okay, hi everyone.
Hello.
Peace, sister.
Yes. Hey, peace and love to you.
Peace.
I am African American, and yes, my family has been here for 400 years. But to answer the question, should we blame Africans for Black Americans for claiming to be Hebrew and all this other stuff? No, we cannot blame them because I believe that some of us truly know who we are. We know we come from West and Central Africa. And I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. Years ago, I was a Hebrew Israelite and I was a Nubian. I got caught up into the cults too. I'm not gonna lie, but I had to do research, and once I'd done the research, um, I just let go all that stuff. And now I just focus on just being a West and Central African descendant woman that was born in America. And I just feel like we need to stop blaming everyone else and look inside ourselves and do real research of who we truly are, which is West and Central African descent. And I don't understand why all these people, I mean, we want to claim Native American and all that stuff. If you, I swear, if you never been to West Africa, take a trip. You will see that we come from these places. You will see, because I've been to Nigeria and I've been to Sierra Leone, and those are definitely our people, especially Nigeria.
Let
If you
them
go
know,
there,
sis.
that is Black America, except for just a different culture. That is us.
Boom.
So that's all I would say. That's all I really have to say. But thank you.
All right, let me pass it to Carl. Go ahead, Carl.
All right. Hello. Hey, shout out to y'all, man. I just the topic. I just want to say, I was reading the title while I was in the chat, and I want to say, you know, we as people, just not just Africans, people have always expanded and went to different places. People were never sedentary. So when we say that we not the Olmecs, that's a lie too. Now, listen, I'm not saying we native. The Olmecs were Africans. Now, we are in fact the descendants of the ones that came from Africa. I'm not saying we the descendants of the Olmecs. But to say that the Olmecs are not African is false because Africans have always, you know, went around the globe. We've always been building ships, you know, we've always been walking around the globe. And to say that we only come from Central and West Africa is also false because humans, we're not sedentary as a people. We can't just sit in one spot. We've always traveled the whole continent of Africa, the whole continent of Asia, the whole continent of Europe, right? So I say I don't call myself Central and West African predominantly. I'm all of Africa because, you know, we travel everywhere. People make babies everywhere, you know, so I can't just say I'm Central and West Africa. I'm all of Africa. And yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead,
Do
go
you
ahead,
know?
Marie. Go ahead, Marie. Then we're gonna
I'm
close out. Go
sorry.
ahead, Marie.
Okay, when
Can
I
I ask a
say
question after Miss Marie?
Go ahead, Marie.
African Americans, we are predominantly really West and Central African. I looked up so many DNA tests. If you look at the DNA test, majority, they're like maybe 60% West African and like 10 to 15% of Central African, and the rest of the DNA is either white, and maybe some African Americans have some Asian DNA like I do. So the reason why I say that, I'm not saying that we don't have a little bit of maybe East African, because I do. I did find two Ugandan and Kenyan cousins, and I do have two Malagasy cousins. So that is true that we have DNA from everywhere, but the majority, the bulk of our DNA is West and Central African. So that's all I wanted to say.
All
Can
right,
I say
guys.
something really quick?
We're gonna go to close. We're gonna go to close out. Everyone, thanks so much for
Can I ask a
joining.
question real quick?
Go ahead.
And can I say
Because
something really quick, please?
okay, you can go ahead. I'm sorry. Go.
You sure I don't want to cut you off?
Yeah, my main point was going to be this. My main point was this. I noticed that Africans kind of downplayed the fact that Europeans were, some of them were chased out religiously. Some of them were criminals cast out, religious cast out, and they still found a way to work with the EU and branch back to those same nations that quote unquote mistreated them. So I feel like we have to have a greater spirit of reconciliation. I'm gonna pass the mic to Chrissy.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I'm gonna give an example. When I was younger, I went through a traumatic experience, and I remember recently talking to my sister's pastor about it. We are just kind of sitting having lunch. It came up, And I described it in such detail. And what he made me realize is that I wasn't healed from it. He said that the way you describe it in such detail is almost as if it happened yesterday. And I'm saying that the way many of us talk about slavery today in 2025, with the emotion and everything, almost as if it happened yesterday. And what that says is that there's a lot of unhealing. It's a sore
Facts.
wound that is there, right? So when you have that happening, until we get to a point where we have to, now nobody in Nigeria can do that work for you. We have to personally and individually, and then at some point collectively, do the work within ourselves to dismantle all the traumas that have come about as a result of our experiences. Rather, it was in the United States, in the Caribbean, and in Africa. We have all been harmed, right, through this experience of slavery and colonization. Until we do that work, there's not going to be any healing. And until you do that work, you won't be able to let go of this animus towards a Nigerian who just graduated university last year and can't find a job in Lagos, but you feel he owes you reparations. And he's living worse than you are. You are living better than him. You understand what I'm saying? So
You still need to pay up.
I'm almost finished. We really have to get to the point of saying that we are a traumatized people. And it doesn't mean that we're weak. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us. It means that we're human, right? And until we start to dismantle that trauma and really start to look into ourselves and understand and even search up that history, I think knowing your history is really important part of that healing. And a lot of us don't really do that work. Cracking open, dusting off those books at the library, cracking them open, and really starting to understand everything is not on the internet. Until you start to do some of that work, and be honest with ourselves about some of the issues that we have, we're always going to be having these conversations in the next 30, 40, and 50 years when we really should be able to be moving on. Yes, and I'm not to downplay it. There are other groups have been through trauma and they've been able to heal and move forward, and we are stuck. And that's a problem.
Can I give a quick conclusion?
No, we got to close out. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, family. Down at Samir Search for Huru. Peace.
Thank you, Prince.